talking with God about kings and kingdoms. Right. So this week, it's we the people, the stupid, and the simple. Come on in. Let's check it out. 1 Samuel chapter 13 and 14.
All the bubbas of the world, we got one mission in mind.
Welcome to the Biblical Channel, and we are so happy to be on Rumble because we're the Rumble, kind of a rumbly kind of people to begin with. It's where Bubba and Biblical meet up, and the Bubbas of the world, they're kind of the rumbly types of the world. So we're happy to be on Rumble. We're happy to be on all these social media platforms as much as we are able. We're just a couple of guys that are doing our best. We're not the most technological people. So we're getting there, though. And little by little, we just feel like, the Bubbas of the world really need our attention. And so anyhow, our whole aim and ambition is to have fun talking about God. And this is the place where we kind of feel like, we take you from the bullshit to the holy shit so that you can start shooting the shit and sound like you actually know your shit. We just want you to read your Bible, say your prayers, and get together with other people and talk God. We really are convinced that if you get God's good book, correct in your mind, you learn all kinds of stuff that you will never hear from anybody else. God is the great teacher. God puts humanity into such a condition that he can actually write a novel from it over the course of thousands of years. Love it. There's nothing on earth like God's good book. And the word Bible just simply means book. So why don't we just call it the book? Okay, so we're in the book, and we're in that part of the book called 1 Samuel. And this is really the first book of 4 books that occupy this, kind of perceived chapter in Israel's history called Kings and Kingdoms. In fact, that's what these 4 books would have been referred to if you were an Israelite growing up. Kings and Kingdoms, was the kind of the compilation of 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings. And it's a continuous storyline, continuous narrative, just so you kind of anchor yourself. So speaking of anchoring yourself, let us anchor our passage here, chapter 13 and 14, to really what's happened before and why maybe we have the title that we have, We the People and the Stupid and the Simple. There are 3 main characters to look at coming up here, and that is Saul, his son Jonathan, and the people. And prior to this, let's just kind of see what the story's been, has given us that's important to this story. And that is 300 years beforehand, God had moved the children of Abraham, which he promised 400 years before that. So 700 years ago, God made a promise to Abraham to move his children, his descendants, into a promised land. And he said, I'm not going to move you in there for 400 years or your descendants in there for 400 years because the judgment of the Canaanites is not yet complete. So God has been very patient with a group called the Canaanites. He gives them 400 years, but they don't get better, they get worse. And so when the time comes, 300 years ago, if you are, in Saul's day, 300 years before Saul's day, Joshua leads the campaign into the promised land. The people, do respond correctly to God. Everything's going really well. They do defeat and rout the Canaanites, but they stop short. Joshua says, man, we got to keep going. The people are like, we're a little bit exhausted. I think this is good enough. And Joshua says, you know what? I'm getting old for this. You're going to have to finish this work. God says you're going to have to finish this work because if you don't, these Canaanites are going to bring you down. And they're like, oh no, it's cool. It's cool. And it's not cool. The Canaanites have been bringing them down. And the Canaanites have all kinds of different groups within them. There's the Amalekites, there's the Amorites, there's all kinds. And the most famous of the groups is the Philistines. You Philistine, you, it used to be kind of vernacular, conjecture, call somebody a Philistine. I think we need to bring that back. That's pretty funny. I think you're a Philistine. And anywho, the Philistines are on view, and they're part of the Canaanite group in general. And this is the section of the Bible that the fun suckers of the world like to, say, oh, God is all about war and killing people, and so the Bible's really not that great. And the fact is you're just not reading it, man. You're just not reading it. If you're standing up for the Canaanites, then you know nothing about people and you know nothing about history. The Canaanites' view of God included pleasing gods or the god or whatever they had by way of children's sacrifices. In fact, the Romans even found them so awful. The Carthaginians were also of the Canaanite groupings, Philistine, kind of people of the sea. And they too included, child sacrifice. The Romans sacrificed human beings, but my God, they never sacrificed a child. They found that deplorable. And so if you're sitting there saying that God is not right to send judgment upon the Canaanite people, then I don't know what to say to you, but God does. And God portrays himself as the judge, and he promises us that he judges correctly, and that no matter what, when we die, whoever dies, when everybody dies, you will meet God as the judge, and he always gets it right. So that's what I put my trust in. I put my trust in God, who always gets it right. And he leaves us with a sure and simple way to get to know him, and that is to review his history of the people that have gone before us. And what we find is that a lot of things change in human events, but what doesn't change is humans. And so these humans here are paradigms that we can see in ourselves today. And that's the beauty of the book, the God book. So where we are now, a little tighter to our story, is that the people in the previous passage were the stupid because they stupidly asked for a king. Samuel, the prophet or the judge of the time, told them, by God, you are stupid for what you want to do because you want it for the wrong reasons. Now, the people were probably saying, as we reviewed in previous works, like, oh, no, God said that we would get a king someday, so we just want a king. And Samuel's like, you want a king for the wrong reasons. You just want to look like the other nations. However, God has told me, Samuel says, he's going to give you what you want. And there's a character by the name of Saul who is tall, dark, and handsome. And he's also wealthy. And he's a man of stature, okay? But he's dumb as a box of rocks. And Saul seemingly has heard from the people of Israel, man, a guy like that would be a good king, showing how weak we are whenever we pick leaders. We tend to pick leaders on all the wrong paradigms. So anyhow, Saul has been the talk of the Israelites. The Israelites come to Samuel and say, ask God to give us a king. Samuel says, this is dumb, you're stupid, all of this. But, the truth is that God says, wait a minute, we can work with this. It is time for a king. You are asking for all the wrong reasons. You are wrong. You are stupid to be asking for a king for your reasons, but I'll give you a king for my reasons because this fits into my story too. And there are some valuable lessons to be learned. So this king, the first king, is Saul. And we could have predicted that it's not going to go very well for Saul. He doesn't seem to be the the sharpest tool in the shed, so to speak. And when he emerges onto the scene, God actually gives him a new heart. He kind of hooks him up with a bunch of prophets, and this new heart that Saul has seems to have conflicted him even more. We find him, when it's time to inaugurate him as king, we find him hiding in baggage, which is kind of hilarious. So it's almost like Saul, through being in touch with the prophetic side of Israel, which he had never been before, now has a new grip or a new idea that, oh, we're not right, and I don't want to be this guy. And so I think Saul is a reluctant king, but he does step up to the plate. He has this grand victory, he gets himself all wound up. He defeats the Philistines, and it looks like everything's going to go well for Saul. He even says to those who had made fun of him being king or didn't want him as king, he's like, listen, I'm not gonna kill you or do anything bad like that. We just all need to unite. So that was Saul's highlight. Now comes Saul's downfall. And I don't think it's right to think that Saul is evil. I just think that he's portrayed to us as silly, dumb, and typical of a human being in many ways. And he is definitely the very Peter principle in action. He has been promoted to his level of incompetency, and it's a bit of a funny story. So there's our background for us, and the three players, once again, the people, the stupid, who were the people, but now the stupid is going to become Saul, and then the simple. The simple also was Saul because he just simply did what God had asked him to do. He routed the Philistines. Everything went really well for him. But now he seems to have intrepidation on his mind, and he seems to be, well, not up for the task. And the people don't seem to be up for the task. And the simple is going to change over to Saul's son, who is Jonathan, who just simply believes in God and becomes the paradigm of hope, so to speak. So let us dive into the text and kind of take a look at this story, how it unfolds. And it's a good story. All these stories are fantastic. And, so let's just dive in and take a look. First of all, so Saul is king and everything's going well, but now it's not going to go so well. But he does what a king does. He chooses 3,000 men to fight for Israel. Good on you, Saul. That's what a king does. And also remember that Saul was specifically chosen to be king to fight the Philistines. That's what the people wanted. They wanted a king to organize them to be their fighter against the Philistines. They wanted the Philistines to be defeated, and they felt like a king had to get this done. Okay? So Saul's main job, and that's actually what God agreed with. He's like, I kind of agree with you. We can definitely move to a king because you do still need to, clean up the work that you've left undone for the last 300 years. You do need to defeat the Philistines. And the rest of the Canaanites, by the way, because they are going to continue to haunt you and bring you down. I promise you that. And they have. And the whole cycle of the judges was just a picture of that, how they kept bringing them down. So this is good. Saul chooses a military. He takes 2,000 men for himself, and he gives 1,000 men to his son, Jonathan. And okay, that looks good. And we're in chapter 13, verse 3. Jonathan gets right out there and defeats a garrison of the Philistines near Geba. Okay, right on. Saul then blows the trumpet and tells, all of the Israelite nation, that, hey, let the Hebrews hear that Saul has defeated the garrisons, a garrison of the Philistines. Now, there's a little bit of trouble right now because he didn't say Jonathan did. He said Saul has. So he's taking credit for Jonathan's work. I don't know if that's good or bad. It doesn't seem good, but we'll let him off on that. The king gets the credit, I suppose. Okay, maybe Jonathan's okay with that too, but there seems to be the potential for a little bit of suspicion there. Like, is that right? Is that good? Anyhow, the Philistines are super mad because they've been defeated. So it's game on. So the Philistines are totally upset. The next paragraph that comes tells us that the Philistines gather their forces together, and they are huge. They gather up 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and troops that don't even get a number. So this compared to Israel's, Saul's 3,000 troops, 2,000 for him and 1,000 for Jonathan, it makes everybody a little bit nervous. Israel just doesn't seem to be up for the task. We are told the people were hard pressed about this. It just doesn't seem like they're getting up for it. And they hide themselves when they see the powerful force. So all of a sudden we find the people hiding themselves. They're really not up for a battle, which is, for us, the reader, I remember I'm a terrible reader. And when I read the Bible for the first time, I was very frustrated with Israel because they couldn't remember, seemingly, that God kept his promise. God, back in Exodus, but the very first gathering, when he told them that I'm going to send you in a land and you're going to fight, a group, you're going to rout a group out of that land called the Canaanites. He said, listen, but your job is easy. Chapter 14, verse 14 of Exodus simply says, your job is to be silent. So Exodus 14:14 literally says, the Lord will fight for you. You will only need to be silent. So Israel's told, by God, I don't need you to really be fighters. I just need you to show up and be faithful. I need you to be my people like you're supposed to be. I'll do the hard work. I'll do the hard work. I don't expect you to like war. I don't even want you to like war, but I do want you to show up. And I want you to, come behind me. I'll lead this thing. So it's a bit surprising always that the people always seem to be intimidated by, whether it's the Philistines or whatever group they see, they're intimidated by them and they're easily swayed by them. And and Saul himself seems to be intimidated by them and swayed by them. And so here's Jonathan though. Jonathan just had great success and it makes the Philistines mad. That's understandable. But now everybody's nervous, like it ain't going to work again. Well, Jonathan's success wasn't about him. It was about God. God gave him great success because he just simply charged out and did what he was supposed to do. Saul and the people seem to be like, oh, wait a minute. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And so Saul decides to play priest, which is a no-no. Because God has set up, kind of like we do in the Constitution, we have a division of power around the law. In the Constitution, we have the law at the center and we have lawmakers. We have and that's one group, Congress, and we have the judges, the judicial branch, and then we also have the executive branch that carries out the laws. And that's kind of that's basically what you see here. You might call the priestly class the lawmakers, and we might call the judges, the prophets, and we might call the kings, the executive branch. They are to carry things out, and that does lie in the pages of the Bible right here. I'm not making that up. That there is this division, and Saul has immediately left his post as king, the executive function, to get things done, and he's gone into the priestly, which is a big no-no. He is not supposed to. God has never commanded him to be there. The only reason why God went along with Saul being a king and Israel having a king was to actually be a military, king to defeat the Philistines. And so here's Saul playing games as a priest. And he starts, he's like, oh, what should we do? What should we do? Okay, well, let's sacrifice. And the people are just leaving in droves. If you read down through this, the people start leaving left and right. And so Saul, this is like a last-ditch effort to keep people running. He's like, wait a minute, let's sacrifice. And then Saul blames Samuel. So Samuel comes onto the scene. Samuel's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, you didn't come in your appointed day. And, now Samuel doesn't say this, but I think we get where he's coming from. He's like, you just need to do your job. Look at Jonathan. He did his job. You just need to do your job. Stick with your job. Don't jump into this job. You have been stupid. So there's the stupid. Samuel literally says, you have done foolishly. That's what my Bible says, but the word underneath that is harsher than foolish. It is stupid. You have behaved stupidly by having this burnt offering. Saul's like, why? Why? It seemed like the right thing to do. You weren't around, and I forced myself to, be, to offer up God's sacrifices. Samuel's like, God didn't ask you to do that. You are stupid. You have acted stupidly. You're not doing your job. You're actually, and this is the great pattern of humanity, is that we blame others and we don't take responsibility for our own failure. So Saul just simply had a job to do to get out there, like Jonathan, his son, is doing. And Samuel comes along, calls him out, and Saul's like, And Samuel's like, hey, I got bad news for you. God has already picked a different king, a different king. Your line is not going to be king. And that's sad, because your line, Saul, if you were faithful, then your line could have been kings forever. Your son would have been king after you, and his son would have been king after you. But nope, God has gone a different direction, because he's actually sought out a man after his own heart. Saul, you are not a man after your own, after God's heart. You seem to be a man after your own heart, and you have simply not been faithful to the commandment of God. And Saul's like, you have, you do. I mean, he's like, he's just, he's just dumb. He's acting stupidly. Well, there we have it. And speaking of God's replacement, who we know who it is, it's David. Think about David's life. What was the first thing that David did before anything? He just went out to a giant Philistine and wailed a rock at him through a sling because he felt like God wanted the Philistines defeated. So he just had simple faith in God, and he went out and defeated the giant Goliath with a rock and a sling, hit him, I guess, square between the eyes or in the temple or some, kill shot. Bam, he's done. But see, little David, and David was not a big man. He was a little guy, a little scrawny red guy. He was ruddy. Anyhow, that is the paradigm that God's looking for. He's not looking for superhuman strength. He just wants some faith. He just wants simple faith. Jonathan, Saul's son, has it, but Saul screws it up for Jonathan. In fact, as the reader, you're like, oh man, I wish we could have had Jonathan as king, right? That would have been a better selection. But part of what God is doing here is showing Israel that their selection was poor, and allowing them to, live with their own consequences, which was a bad idea. But God said, no, I can work with this idea because I'm going to need this idea of a king going forward in my story, in my book that I'm putting together. And yeah, if you can see it working its way towards Jesus Christ, then you're hitting the nail on the head. But for now, we know that David is waiting in the wings now. Saul has been told by God through Samuel, you're toast, buddy. Your family is not going to carry on the kingship anymore. That's going to develop a huge tension in the story. So back to our story, though. Saul gets his act together, and he actually does, mount, an attack, and it'll be successful. But here's the thing, the number of troops, the people have now dwindled down to 600. So they have lost confidence in Saul. In fact, if you go down through the text, the people were hard pressed. The people were sent home by Saul. And then Saul calls them all back. And then the people, after being hard pressed, they're trembling. And then the people scatter and they go hiding. And then, Saul calls the people back. And now he's only got 600. But God doesn't care about that. And the Philistines, they're getting ready to attack. And then this other paragraph beginning in verse 19 of chapter 13, it really tells us a picture of how the Philistines were quite oppressive. The Israel didn't even have a sword. We are told Jonathan and Saul are the only two that have swords. Why? Because the Philistines are really in control, and they won't allow Israel to have any weapons. They won't let the Hebrews have any weapons. They can get their plows sharpened and their tools sharpened, but they don't have any real weapons. They just have farm tools, and they have to even get them sharpened by the Philistines, who are keeping a log of their weapons. So some of this sound familiar? That when a government that tries to oppress somebody, that they want to keep a log of the people's weapons, and they want to keep people from having weapons. I'll let you fill in the gaps on that. No, I won't. The Second Amendment, written by the Constitution, written in the Bill of Rights by the founding framers, is there to make sure that government behaves. Hold that thought. I'm moving forward, though. Now we get a nice picture of Jonathan. Jonathan, he has an armor bearer, and Jonathan just simply looks. In the numbers have dwindled down, so Jonathan doesn't have 1,000. But Jonathan doesn't care. He just says to his armor bearer, he's like, "Hey, come with me." And his armor bearer goes, and they look over at the Philistines, and he's like, "Hey, you know what? Hey, we'll yell out to the Philistines, and when they see us, if they call us up to them, then we know that God has given them to us to defeat them. But if they say they want to come down and meet us, well, then we'll know that it's not, God is not with us, and that we probably need to run." So that's what he does. But see, Jonathan knows that God has called Israel to defeat the Philistines. So he just does this simple, and he's just got his simple armor bearer. And it's a hilarious story because he just this guy just does this. This is just like David's, Jonathan has just as an impressive of a story as David does whenever he knocks down Goliath with the rock and a sling. And so now Jonathan turns, to the Philistines by himself with his armor bearer, and he's like, hey, and they're like, hey, come on up. And Jonathan's like, we got them. And then what we're told happens is that they charge up, and then God steps in and does the fighting. God steps in and actually creates a great confusion, so much so that the Philistines start attacking themselves and they rout themselves. And there's little Jonathan, like just swinging a sword, and his armor bearer just, like standing by, and they totally rout this garrison of Philistines, and that's hilarious. That's great stuff. And then, then Saul, the lookouts are looking, they're like, hey man, something big's happening down there. And so what does Saul do? Well, he goes back to being a priest, and he's like, hey, I need the ark. And then he seems like he gets into an argument with the priest, Ahijah. It seems like they're arguing, but Saul wants to take the ark with him. And he finally says, withdraw your hand. And then Saul takes the ark and actually has success in battle. But before he does all of this, he makes his men swear an oath that they aren't going to eat. But he also does a head count, and he knows Jonathan's not with him, but he makes everybody swear this oath that everybody that eats this day is going to be killed. And he knows this, and it's just a picture of how dumb and how stupid Saul behaves, because his son, actually, we're told, he's eaten all day. He's eaten the same honey, and then Saul's troops, they're not eating. Stupid move. I mean, why send a military out on a fast, right? I mean, and we are told that they are hard pressed. Of course they're hard pressed, because they're not allowed to eat anything. And when they catch up with Jonathan and they tell Jonathan, hey man, you're not allowed to eat today, and Jonathan's like, oh my Lord, he knows his father. He knows his father. But again, his father's playing priest, and he delivers this really stupid oath that is going to come back to haunt him. And Jonathan knows his dad. He's like, my father has troubled the land. Oh my goodness. See, and sometimes this is the saddest thing of all, when your children are smarter than you. God did not design your children to be smarter than you. He designed you to be smarter than your children, and to allow them to take from you and never, well, I guess it's great that when your children can be smarter than you, but you're not supposed to be stupid as a father. Saul is stupid. And so, Jonathan is like, ay caramba. And Saul's stupidity is now going to come back to haunt him, because, when Saul is going to make another attack, and he said, and a priest comes along, he's like, hey, shouldn't you ask God if you should go? And Saul's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So he asks God if he should go, and he gets no answer. And he's like, uh-oh, there's a problem, because he would have given me an answer. Which also tells you that he knows better than to play priest. He knows that he can go to God and get answers. So God doesn't give him an answer, and he gets nervous, and he's like, okay, we got to find out who the sinner was. And it turns out that God's going to make him eat his words, because God is silent because of the oath that he took, and Jonathan has committed a crime according to Saul's oath. And so Saul says, we're going to find out who ate today. And so he draws lots, and guess what? The lots fall on Jonathan. And now Saul's like, well, I got to kill you. And Jonathan's like, you do what you got to do. But totally, I mean, this is just a thing of beauty when it comes to stories, a thing of beauty. Jonathan says, you do what you got to do. And then the story gets beautiful. This is where we, the people, redeem ourselves in the storyline. The people rise up just when they're listening into all of this dialogue between Saul and saying, well, I got to kill you because I swore an oath. And Jonathan's like, you got to do what you got to do. Because Jonathan has faith in God. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if he dies. And he's like, hey, I understand, Dad, go ahead. And the people step in, and we are told that they ransom Jonathan from Saul, but the people rise up to put the government in check. So The fourth ideal of the Declaration of Independence is built on the people have the right to alter and abolish bad government. And here, right here, the people, as weak-kneed and as pathetic and as wrong as they were, at times they rise up and they do the right thing. And they put Saul down. And they tell Saul, no, we're not telling you can't be king, but we are not going to permit you to kill Jonathan, who actually is the only one demonstrating good faith around here and getting things done. So I just find this to be a wonderful story because it paints a picture of things that we should know today. You know, that we, the people, get swayed into bad ideas, but we, the people, rally into good ideas. And we got to do some thinking and ask ourselves, are we on board with the right ideas? You know, I think the Declaration of Independence comes straight off the pages of the Bible. Equality, great thing. God's idea. Inalienable rights, once again, God's idea. We have rights that God gives us, not governments. That the government is created by us and should get its permission from us. Yeah, that's a good idea. God never wanted a human king in a government for us. What God wanted is for him to be our king. And the people have the right to destroy bad government or alter it or demolish it, do whatever. Those are the four ideals in the Declaration of Independence. And so in this storyline, we see the bad government of Saul, that he gets mixed in with bad religion, you know, because he's not even practicing, you know, his religion well. And he just leads everybody back and forth, you know, and God predicted this. God said, you will be carried away by, you know, a numbskull whenever you have a king. Anywho, Jonathan becomes the hero in our story, as well as the people become a hero in our story. And we'll end it right there. Till next time.